Hello and welcome to the Movoto Mike podcast, a new real estate podcast brought to you by Movoto.com. My name is Patrick Kearns. I am an ex-journalist and 10-year vet of the real estate industry who is currently working as Movoto's head of communications. Here with me today is my associate, Sophie Brandeis. Sophie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited about the guest we have on. She is remarkable.
Awesome. Sophie, can you tell me who your guest is today?
So today on the Movoto Mic, we are excited to have Steph Douglass, CEO and broker of Open House Austin. Open House Austin is a woman-owned real estate brokerage that helps people navigate non-traditional home ownership in Austin, Texas. They've assisted hundreds of clients in buying and selling properties through house hacking, partnerships, and tapping into home equity. Steph, welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to dive in.
This is continuing a long trend of folks that we've had on the podcast now. You are a Longhorn like Sophie. Is that correct?
Yes, hook 'em.
Awesome. There we go.
All right. I love it. I think you are the fourth Longhorn maybe that we've had on the podcast at this point, which makes sense given that we are also an Austin-based company. So sort of looking at your background, it's a mix of a lot of real estate and some education. I'm married to a teacher, so I'm very familiar with the journey in education, but sort of talk to me a little bit about that transition. Talk to me about like why real estate now, why that's sort of your big focus and sort of where you got your start.
Yes, I taught fourth grade math for 7 years in the charter programs in Austin. I was very passionate about my job and I loved educating. I love watching people grasp concepts. Like it's a huge part of who I am. But the pay was not great and the quality of life was tough for me because I'm so extreme. And so I was very like physically ill almost. Like my quality of life was low and I knew that there was something that I could do that was like a higher quality of life for me. So I bought my first house as a first year teacher, started earning passive income from having a roommate. And I was like, this is amazing. Could I scale this? And what would that look like? And so I started to play around with like creative house hacking strategies, not even having those words in my vocabulary yet. Like what piece of my house could I rent out next? You know, like this bedroom's not being used. I'm going to try to put this on Airbnb and just like have strangers come through my house. And so piecing those things together and then kind of escalating from there made me realize that I could relatively easily replace my teacher salary with real estate investment income. And so I transitioned away from teaching, which was hard. Like I really, really loved my job. But I eventually realized that I was losing money by going to work every day because I had also gotten my real estate license. I was teaching people how to invest in real estate and I made that my full-time job. And now I have a brokerage here in Austin. We have 4 agents who are also really investment minded. And so that's like a huge value of ours. But I've grown to have a real estate portfolio of 19 properties and 34 doors. And so, yeah, there's a lot in between there, but that's my journey.
So where do you think you got this entrepreneurial spirit from?
That is a great question. I think that the scrappiness with which I was raised, I focused that into real estate. And I think that can be focused in a lot of directions, but figuring things out was always my MO. I wasn't that great at school and I figured out how to get good grades. You know, I knew that I had to turn in the assignments. I had to work the system in a way that like was catered to my skills. I have a lot of soft skills. Like I can talk to people, I can go into a room, I can figure stuff out. I don't have a lot of hard skills. And so figuring out what industry that worked with that made it possible for me to be successful was key. And the scrappiness was a huge part of it. Like doing things that I had never seen people do before. The creative part of real estate, it's shocking like how much $1,000 a month can do for someone, you know, like to completely covering your mortgage every month. Most people's biggest expense is their living. Like if I could cover that, I was like, okay, I'm set. And then I was like, if I can cover that, I can do more. And so having that scrappy foundational part of me, I think made me into the entrepreneur that I am today.
It's so interesting because it's such I would say it's like such a regular theme on this podcast, right? Is like people that have built successful careers in real estate. Like there's not like a, here's the book, here's the playbook, you just have to follow it and like be really good at the thing that everybody else does. It's like, it's always like scrappiness. You can't, there's no amount of like hard limit to the amount of hard work that you need to put in to build a career in real estate, but that also doesn't put a ceiling on things for you, right? Like if you've just got a normal job, you can be really, really great at that job, but like you're going to make sort of generally what everybody else in that salary range is going to make, but like real estate is you're on your own and sort of like building a lot of your own career. So to sort of follow up on that, I'm interested in Open House Austin, sort of from the untrained eye and a little bit of looking. It looks like it's an indie brokerage. Talk to me about why operating as an indie when you've got like franchise networks, being part of a large brokerage system. What benefits does being this indie brokerage afford y'all?
Yeah, we started off under a larger brokerage. Actually, they just got acquired by Compass. It was Realty Austin, and we were butting heads on branding and messaging. And like as a independent brokerage, we really set ourselves apart by offering a lot of education, like having sort of a first time buyer tilt, but also in like a less salesy, more approachable, I've done this so you can do it too type of way. And so having our own brand was really important. And I know some bigger brokerages allow you to brand yourself, but it seemed like in the spirit of what we teach to have our own face and our own company. And in fact, we just started renting a space, and even that feels like anti what we what we teach. And so I'm like in the market to buy a commercial space so that we can, live what we teach and like, yeah, practice what we preach. I feel like that draws people to us. Like they see me, I look like a normal person, and they see what I've been able to do in real estate, and they feel like they can do it too.
Right. It's really inspiring how you've taken your love for teaching and educating, and you've just applied it to a whole different industry. And theoretically, you're giving people the keys to using real estate to make money.
Exactly. And that is where it comes back to always is net worth, wealth building, freedom, essentially. And freedom is my main value. And so freedom and community, really. And so I've figured out a way to be financially free, financially flexible. And the first thought is, how can I teach other people to do this? Like I figured out this almost hack to life, and I want to spread the word. But that's, it comes with its own challenges. Like we've definitely gotten our fair share of like, you're the problem. You're, that you could always just quietly do this. But like, if you're spreading the word, there's pros and cons.
Let's talk about your website, because I was doing some research and you talk about the different types of non-traditional home ownership. Could you de-blur those for the average listener who maybe isn't familiar with that concept? Maybe talk us through a few.
Yeah. So our mission is to help people break through the barriers of traditional homeownership. And that to me, traditional homeownership means you get married, you buy a house, you have a kid, and that's just like the way that people's lives are supposed to go. And breaking through that to me means buying earlier, and then also being creative about who you're buying with. We help people buy with partners. I've grown my portfolio almost exclusively through having partners and kind of like looking at a deal, assessing what needs to happen for that deal, and then figuring out the pieces that need to be put together so it can happen. And it might mean doing that with your mom or your cousin or your friend. And so those are kind of the partnership angle. And then also traditionally you buy a house and you just live in it, and that's what you do. And so the other angle to that is you buy a house, but then how can you replace your mortgage with income? How can you utilize your house as essentially a business and figure out the ways that you can provide space for other people and they want to pay for it, and then they pay your full mortgage or even cash flow your mortgage. So those are kind of like the two angles that we take, and it's really popular with millennials, and then we're seeing more and more Gen Z like starting to pick up on the fact that real estate means more freedom.
Awesome. How do you sort of account for right, not everybody is starting from the same playing field. So like there's a part of this education that needs to be tailored to people individually. Like I know at Movoto and our parent company Ojo, that's like been a big thing, right? We're meeting people where they are. We've got solutions for wherever somebody is in the real estate journey. So like how do you learn about somebody and sort of learn about their background and tailor the solutions to them?
That's such a good question. And that's part of the reason why we've been successful, I think, because there's so much information out there. You could Google anything and you can find 5 different answers for the same question, but it's really individual to your situation. And so that is why having a brokerage and having agents that are essentially like personal consultants that comes into play, and like me kind of imparting my experience and knowledge to my agents who can then help people figure out where they fit into this puzzle. And like not everyone has a huge down payment, not everyone has the flexibility. Some people want to travel and they don't want to be tied down. It's like they come to those consultation calls with their specific set of circumstances, and then from there we brainstorm and we help them kind of come up with a strategy. But you're right, like it's so different for everyone, and people want that one answer, like, well, how much down should I put? It's like, even with the answers that we have, it's going to be different for every single person.
You say houses before spouses, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's very clever. Single women buying homes traditionally just hasn't been a thing. It's not talked about. Even today, it's not talked about. It's starting to change. Why do you think that's changed? And how does Open House contribute to that?
Man, we're still good. It's almost inflammatory to say houses before spouses online now. But I think that the reason this is growing is because people are getting married later and later. And if you are waiting to get married to buy a house, you are missing out on what could be 15 years of equity. Our parents got married at 21, and then they bought a house at 22, and they were able to capitalize on 10, 20, 30 years of equity, whereas we're getting married at 31 to 36, and that's 15 years. So I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing this more and more. So recently women weren't even able to have a bank account. So like we're still we're still like responding to those type of things. But I think the biggest piece of what Open House has to do with houses before spouses and just single women buying is like making it an option, like making this more normal, normalizing women buying houses, and not just women, but like anyone who's single, men too, having the option to say like, actually, it is kind of normal for if I'm ready to buy, even if I'm not partnered, I can do it.
It's so interesting too, because it's like the very traditional path that you laid out is exactly the path that I followed, right? My wife and I rented forever. We got married. We had a kid. We were living in New York City. We moved to Austin, and then we moved to upstate New York. And we found like, all right, we should buy a house, right? And like, I've worked in real estate for nearly a decade now, and like, the idea of buying a house was still terrifying to me. Like, I know all there is to know. I've worked with real estate agents. I was a journalist that covered the real estate industry. Like, theoretically, I should have been the most prepared person, but I was like really nervous to start the process. And then when it was over, I was like, oh, that wasn't that bad or hard. And my agent was great. And I felt like very taken care of the whole way. But it feels like people's like do sometimes just like need that little light push to be like, you can do this. It's not going to be that scary, but you need the right people around you and sort of like the right process. So I just like, it's less of a question and more of just a comment on like how important the role of like a really good advisor is in the entire process.
So true. I feel like our jobs are, we're showing houses. Some, yes, we're executing contracts, but a huge part of our job is like the therapy that you need through this process. It's huge. I mean, you're spending, it's the biggest purchase of your life, and it's really hard for people. And there's a lot of trauma around finances that people are working through. And so having the education to make yourself feel confident, and then the support from the team, it's just so big.
Your company, Open House Austin, helps people purchase homes in Austin. So if our listeners are somewhere other than Austin, What would you say makes a great agent to support someone whose goal is to buy a house in a non-traditional way? Because if they were in Austin, they'd obviously come to your brokerage.
Yes, we help people in the Austin area, but I think the biggest thing that sometimes gets overlooked is, have they done it before? Like, is this something that they're experienced in personally? And then it's really easy to be talked out of something when when an agent doesn't understand. Like if they don't share the same values, if they don't understand exactly what you're trying to do, they're going to try to talk you out of it and push you toward a more traditional path, because frankly, that's easier for agents. They want you to just do what everyone else has done. So I think interviewing agents and asking about their personal experiences and their value systems, and like, do they have an investment mindset? And then also, it's really easy to use someone who is like a friend of a friend, or like your mom's cousin. And I think that the importance of having someone on your team that is experienced in this and really strong and a good advisor is underrated. I think people think agents don't have that big of a role. They're just opening doors. And I think that is, you can really, really utilize a good agent and have them help you a lot, and have that translate into income or equity.
Yeah. And like the agents that like we work with at Movoda, like you have to keep a certain number of transactions, right, and a certain level of performance, because it is so important to make sure that like if we're connecting you, a consumer, with an agent, like we know this agent can get the job done and we know it's the right person for them.
100%.
Right. Like there is just, that's such an important part of it.
Yeah. It's micro changes, like micro week to week, day to day things are changing. So if you're a part-time agent, it's not the highest level of quality or highest level of service.
Yeah. And especially with the competitive nature of the industry right now. What sort of specific qualities do you all look for in an agent, right? Because you've got a very specific niche. So like when you're looking to add to your team and interviewing agents, and like what sort of things are you looking for?
So we're looking for investment-minded agents. Obviously, I've mentioned that a few times, but it's a focus on customer service at a level that like is very unusual. Like this is our focus is definitely first-time buyers, but also like we're going to make this an investment for you that will benefit you for the rest of your life. And so it's like we're not running rental analysis. We're running, I just actually helped an agent build out like a rental analysis spreadsheet for like 4 different scenarios for the same house. There's stuff like that just isn't really expected. That is like a huge part of the buying process. Like this is important for you to know all of angles and all the different options. And so that's huge. And then flexibility, like we aren't doing the typical deals. We're not just like having people buy single family homes and then move into them. It's like we know the city code regulations, we know the zoning code, we know those type of things that not everyone needs to know. We do, because we're doing kind of creative deals. So I try to hire people that are flexible in those regards, where you're not just doing the traditional thing.
Could you tell us a story of maybe one of the first people that you've helped achieve freedom, or one of the people you've helped buy a home in a non-traditional way?
Yes. Actually, the very first people that I helped buy a house, they are now living in Puerto Rico. They have both of the houses that they bought in Austin through our brokerage still functioning as rental properties. And the first one they moved into, and they added a tiny home, and then they split we call it sneaky duplex, which is basically like separating off the primary suite and renting that on Airbnb. So essentially, legally, they have 3 units on that property, and they're cash flowing enough to be living in Puerto Rico. One of them has a job. They have 3 kids. They're just like, it's very inspiring to see that buying a house does not need to mean that you're settling down or that you're stuck in a place. And so that it kind of exemplifies, especially since they were so early on and they've had this time in the market, it shows that like it's it's dedicated consistency, and you'll see like huge rewards if you put in the work up front.
Yeah, that's amazing. One of the things that I find really interesting on like the idea of house hacking and different types of traditional buying is that like zoning is a really hot topic like nationally, and like there's a not enough houses right now, right? It's like you're talking about somebody buying a property and then subdividing it, like it's theoretically creating more housing. Like talk to me a little bit about like how you view the current state of the real estate market, and like magic wand, what is something that like you'd love to see change about how the United States does housing, because we do it so differently than the rest of the world.
Yes. I think Austin is doing some really cool things right now. We have, I don't know if you're familiar with the Home Initiative, but they're essentially making it possible for 3 houses to be built on one lot. And that is the energy that we want to see moving forward. Is density is amazing. We have a housing shortage. We have houses on large lots where there's a lot of people that don't, we call them NIMBYs, where they don't want more density. But like specifically in Austin, there's places that used to be suburbs that are now the center of downtown. So having the option to have 3 people on one, or 3 families on one lot as opposed to just one, you're tripling the amount of housing that's possible for that area. And I like to think Austin is at the forefront of this because we have such unique problems that are like, you're seeing it in other growing cities as well. And so if we can be at the forefront of this, that would be amazing. But there's a lot of resistance. And so if I could wave a magic wand and just say, this is how housing is done, it would definitely involve more density, more flexibility in zoning. I think obviously zoning is there for a reason, where they're trying to preserve the quality of life of the citizens of the city. But I think there's a lot of old school regulation that really hurts affordability and just quality of life. I think the walkability is huge. Like just being in close proximity to a grocery store and the things that you need on the regular is so important. And so being able to put a grocery store where, there's used to be residential zoning is really, really hard. It's really, really hard. And so they just make it, I don't know how much you have experience in development, but I've considered going to development and then been like, nope, I'm not, I have no desire.
A lot of red tape.
Yeah, it's so hard. And so of course we have a housing shortage because no one wants to do it. There's just too many hoops to jump through. So I would say density, walkability, and reduced hurdles for developers. And I know there's so much that comes along with that. Like there's just not one right answer, but I think those 3 things would be a part of my plan.
A quick plug for our first episode with Brad Inman. He talked about fighting NIMBYism back in the 80s. And that was like what originally got him into real estate, was like fighting NIMBYs in like the Bay Area in the 80s. So that's like a full circle, that this has been going on for a really, really long time. And people are fighting the good fight against NIMBYism.
Before this podcast recorded, Patrick and I were talking about TikTok, and it had me thinking that there's a lot of real estate, house hacking, get rich quick influencers online. Can you talk about maybe some misconceptions that people are preaching online, and debunk some industry lies?
I mean, the fact that it's easy should never enter anyone's mind. It's just not easy. Real estate is also not passive. I would say you can build it like a business and make it more passive than not. But like a get rich quick for real estate is just not, especially now with the interest rates. Like we're in a really wild time in real estate. I'm 35. I've been in real estate since 2013, and it's just been a bull market with low interest rates. And so I definitely would never want anyone to enter this thinking this is going to be easy. I'm going to be able to do this quickly, and it's going to be passive income for me. It's definitely not easy. And I think the time in market is so big. Like I'm a long-term investor. I know that there's people who like flipping houses. I don't see flipping as investing. I see that as a job. And so I would say like delineating between those two things. Long-term investing, like I don't see tons and tons of income right now from my properties. It's like, I know that I will in the future. It is a long-term play. So that's part of it. I know that as one of those people on the internet, sort of, I get a lot of people saying, I mentioned this, but like you are the problem. If you're buying multiple houses, then you are the problem. And I think that is a dangerous thing to spread, because as someone who started with very little as a teacher, my parents were blue collar, like this is a really cool way to enter in and grow wealth with a really low barrier to entry. And so if you're stopping yourself because you think that that's going to make you part of the problem, then that's a bummer, like that part that I'm sure you guys have talked about this and have people on. That's a dangerous angle, I think.
Yeah, totally. We like to play a little game at the end of our episodes called Let's Get Real, where we hit you with some rapid fire questions, and it's just answer right off the top of your head, right? First thing that comes to mind. They're not going to be, it's not going to be too hard. We're not going to ask you to reinvent the wheel here, but just a sort of fun, easy thing to wrap up with. First question is, what is one thing that you think every entrepreneur should know?
Know how much it costs to get a customer, and then know how much that customer brings you.
One piece of advice for a first-time homebuyer.
I would say being really strategic about the down payment is huge. Putting too much down can make you feel strapped for cash, can drain your reserves, and potentially doesn't lower your monthly payment enough to make it worth it. So just like not feeling the pressure to put more down than you need to.
What is so special about owning property in Austin, Texas?
Austin, Texas is the best city in America. Sorry. But I feel like having been a property owner here since 2013, watching it grow, I know there's a lot of people who don't like the growth. I think it's really exciting. I feel like I live in a different city every day, and being a part of a city that's innovating and doing interesting things, it's really special.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I agree with you. Austin is the best city in the country.
Yeah.
It was great to learn from you and awesome to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was amazing.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.